Hello, my name is Lewis and welcome to Gathering the Magic. Today we're looking at the top 10 best Rakdos commanders in MTG. Starting off this list at number 10 we're looking at Grenzo, Dungeon Warden. Originally from the Conspiracy set, Grenzo ETBs with X11 counters on it. You can also pay 2 to put the bottom card of your library into your graveyard. If it's a creature with power less or equal to Grenzo's power, you put it straight on the field. Instantly, we want to make sure that this Grenzo deck has plenty of those ways to fix what's on the bottom of your library, and fortunately, there is plenty in MTG. We also want plenty of ways to beef up Grenzo, whether it's going the Goblin Tribal route to have those Goblin boosters, or just those generic equipment to really power it up. The stronger Grenzo is, the more powerful creatures we can cheat off the bottom of our library onto the field to help our army grow. Finally, if you're looking for the win con to complete this deck, then just go the Infinite Army standard play in Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker and Zealous Conscripts. Activate Kiki Jiki, creating a copy of Zealous Conscripts. The Zealous Conscripts token ETBs untapping Kiki Jiki. Rinse, repeat, and then you've got that Infinite Haste Army for the win. Grenzo is a really cool commander, and unique enough that I think I may build a deck around it in the future.
Could you stop saying that?
Before we get on to number 9 in our list, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. It's completely free to do, and it helps our channel grow and grow as we head towards 2,000 subscribers. Next up on the list we have Obosh, the Prey Piercer. From Ikoria, this companion creature says if a source with an odd mana value would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. This deck is very self-explanatory, getting all of those ways with an odd mana value that can deal damage, whether it's those 1 damage pingers or creatures that have those triggers that deal damage. The perfect thing about Obosh being in Rakdos is there is an endless amount of cards that already have those triggers to deal double damage, so if you have those in and then the amount of damage done is going to multiply fast. Here is where I'll throw in this video's trusty and prestigious Gathering the Magic Card of the Deck award. This time it's going to Heartless Hidetsugu. This 5 CMC creature can tap and deal damage to each player equal to half of that player's life total rounded down, meaning that it can potentially eliminate a player on its own thanks to the doubling Obosh trigger. And yes, of course, add in the best card in all of Magic the Gathering, Prickly Marmoset. It's got 3 CMC, first strike, that Obosh trigger. What can even beat that? Coming in at number 8 we have Jury, Master of the Review. From Commander Legends, this human shaman says whenever you sack a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Jury, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this deck is all about that sacrifice, having all of those staple creatures that ETB and remove yours and your opponent's creatures, those cards to get some card draw or recursion via sacrifice, or even those rampy cards to sacrifice and get you some mana onto the field. The best thing about Jury is that it says permanent, meaning it can be anything you control, that being a creature, artifact, or even a land. Finally, if you really want some positive generation, focus on that treasure. There's endless cards that will reward your sacrifice with some treasure, meaning you can generate so much value that in the end you can easily afford those big endgamers to get you the victory. Jury, you're really a great commander, and one that looks very fun to pilot. Next up on the list is Cardo, Doom Scourge. Cardo says when it ETBs until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. And whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. For this deck you really want to lean into that forced attacking, especially in red. There are loads of cards to goad your opponent's creatures, create them more creatures that will then goad their creatures, and even cards that will benefit from having your opponents attack each other. You can even add in some flickering cards to get Cardo hitting the field time and time again so you're always protected. Finally, your opponents will hopefully be wiping out each other's creatures left, right and centre, so have plenty of cards crammed in there that will gain you life, and plenty of those cards to gain you life whenever creatures are leaving the field. With of course you gaining so much life that you may as well throw in that Aetherflux Reservoir option to drain your opponents for 50 life and get the win. Just missing out on the top half is Mogus, God of Slaughter. This indestructible god says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogus deals 2 damage to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. This is the perfect deck if you really want a bit of that group slug. We're going to be having cards to ping and punish your opponents for everything. Playing lands, drawing cards, playing creatures, you name it, this deck will punish you for it. You could even go extra evil in this deck. You'll hopefully be making your opponents discard so many cards or creatures. If you pack in those cards like Turgid, you'll be increasing your board state whilst your opponent's diminishes. Finally, don't be afraid to go enchantment heavy in a Mogus deck. The more enchantments we have on the field, the more creative ways we're getting to drain our opponents, which is the aim of the game until they have nothing left. Mogus is a brilliant and definitely a little bit of an evil choice for Commander, but definitely a great choice if you like to sit back at the Commander table and watch the world burn. Next up on this Rakdos list is Prosper Tomebound. New from the AFC Commander set, this Death Touch Warlock says at the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play this card, and whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So this deck heavily leans into that exile theme to generate that token treasure value. We'll be going exile crazy, creatures that attack and exile cards, instants and sorceries to exile you even more cards, and even cards that you'll gain from exiling those cards. Who doesn't love a nice cascade trigger? As is the theme with Rakdos, why not go evil and play all those cards to steal your opponent's cards, putting those into exile and casting them, also getting yourself a nice tasty treasure token. If you're a big mana generating loving sort of person, then you can also heavily lean into treasure for this deck. Find ways to make more treasure and even play those great cards that will make you double the amount of treasure whenever you create those tokens. I really can see why Prosper has become such a popular commander so quickly, and maybe I want to build this deck even more than I want to build that Grenzo deck. And I promise I'll never say that ever again in this video. Just missing out on that bronze medal position is Crocs, Titan of Death's Hunger. From Theros Beyond Death, this Elder Giant with that escape mechanic says whenever it ETBs or attacks, each opponent discards a card, then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. We are going discard crazy with Crocs. We're adding in tons of those cards that will force our opponents to discard more cards, but also throw those cards that will have extra triggers and punishment whenever an opponent does discard a card. You can also lean into that wheel strategy, keep everyone constantly discarding their hand and prevent them from gaining any sort of momentum. If you've got Crocs firmly on the board, you may even want some extra combat phase cards to trigger it over and over again each turn. Finally, once again get in all of those devilish card stealers to really gain from all of this discarding and have a few of those big graveyard loving creatures to have as those powerful swingers to destroy your opponents with. Excellent. For the next card on this list we have Chainer, Nightmare Adept. From Modern Horizons 2, this human minion says if you discard a card, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard, doing so once per turn. And whenever a non-token creature ETBs under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste until your next turn. This deck is all about that graveyard love. We're adding in all sorts of mill-loving cards here, casting several spells to tutor cards from your library to put straight into your graveyard, and having plenty of those secondary options to reanimate those cards from your graveyard so they're benefiting from Chainer and getting haste. There are not only plenty of huge creatures that we can put in the graveyard, but plenty that either benefit from graveyard play or allow you to return even more creatures from the graveyard to the field. If we've got a few of those free sack outlet cards, then we can get these creatures from the graveyard onto the field, let them trigger off, sack them again, and then bring them back again with Chainer for an endless loop of chaos. Chainer really is a dastardly commander that once it gets going will be very hard for your opponents to handle. Runner-up and the second best Rakdos commander is Rakdos, Lord of Riots. The Guildmaster himself has Flying Trample and says you can't cast spells unless an opponent has lost life this turn, and creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. This deck is all about draining to the max, having plenty of cards that will drain your opponents, especially on your or their upkeep, so you can start casting things straight away. We'll also go straight into that deadly combination of Havoc Festival that stops players from gaining life, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses half of their life total rounded up. An Archfiend of Despair that says at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn. This is an almost instant KO drain. With a life drain heavy strategy, we can afford to pack tons of those huge mana creatures into this deck. We'll be draining our opponents for so much, the casting cost of some of these creatures will be ridiculously cheap. Meaning not only can we use all of these cards to drain our opponents within an inch of their life total, but also have the quickest, scariest board to get that dominating victory. And for the best card in all of Rakdos we have Angie Falconraf. From Commander 19, this hasty vampire can tap to discard a card and draw a card, and whenever you discard a card, if it has Madness, untap Angie. So, as expected, this card is all about that Madness mechanic. Pack in absolutely every Madness card under the sun so that Angie is always discarding, drawing us a card and helping us get through our deck quick. The beauty with this madness mechanic is when they're discarded, they're going into exile to be able to cast with that normally much cheaper madness mechanic, so you're getting a win-win with Angie there. Once again, as it is similar with the other decks earlier, we can add in those cards that will damage your opponent's creatures or chip away at their life total whenever these cards are discarded to help you get that one step closer to victory. And also, a lot of the other commanders already mentioned on this list are perfect additions to slot into the 99 of this deck. Angie is an extremely fun but also sneakily powerful commander, and it's very easy to see why this is the most popular Rakdos commander amongst the MTG faithful. There we have it, that is the Rakdos commander list. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description below for all of our social media and affiliate links. For now though, I am all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.